Good day, everybody. Welcome to Two Way Tonight, a special expanded version of Two Way Tonight. I'm your host, Marc Halperin. Thank you for joining. Honored to have you here. Just to run through the evening a little bit here, and tomorrow, we'll be here with the hour. Marc Caputo and Michael LaRosa are here. We'll talk about President Trump and Vladimir Putin. We'll talk about the latest Biden developments. And then at 7 o'clock Eastern time, we will roll into our second hour tonight with Steve Ballmer of USA Facts. We'll talk a lot about the best way to be a good citizen and informed and how to read data. Really important stuff. So 2 hours tonight. Right after that, I'll be on with Chris Cuomo. So if you want more of me after 2 hours, you still want more, you can flip over to News Nation. And then tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean is off, but Dan and I will be here with a special guest host for Sean. And then later in the day, if you want still more of my content, on Next Up, my guest will be Joe Scarborough, my friend, and I will talk about the whole history of the Biden acuity matter. Joe and I both have known Joe Biden for a long time, and I think you'll enjoy our conversation as we run through how we see the arc of what happened. Okay. Today, President Trump in the Oval Office, after meeting with Vladimir Putin by telephone for 2 hours, came out and gave a relatively optimistic view of their call. Here is Donald Trump, number 10, please. Oh, my apologies. Number 9, please.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. What a shame that it ever started in the first place. But I want to thank Melania for your leadership in this very important issue. It's an amazing issue. America is blessed to have such a dedicated and compassionate First Lady. I would tell you she is very dedicated. In fact, if you look at just what I heard, Putin just said they respect your wife a lot. I said, what about me? No, they like Melania better. That wasn't good. I don't know if that was good. I'm okay with it. I'm okay.
All right, so the president relatively bullish on the prospects of peace talks. Then, yes, please, now put up number 10. Then a long Truth Social post along the same lines. The president dangling the prospect of increased trade with Russia if the war is settled, and of course, potentially large-scale trade with Ukraine as well. Ukraine can be a great beneficiary of trade, he writes, on and on. Let the process begin, exclamation point. So bullish there. Less bullish was the readout from Moscow and the coverage overall, number 8. The Wall Street Journal headline, pretty similar to what we see elsewhere. Trump-Putin call yields no breakthrough on Ukraine ceasefire. So we'll see what happens there. Now, extraordinary period. There's some other small news out there on a variety of smaller things, but let's go right to the Biden story. Lots of developments today, and again, just to review the chronology. Friday, Axios broke the story of her audio tape, which put in sharp relief the degree of President Biden's decline and inability to answer questions in a way that give folks confidence in his capacities. And then heading to the book released tomorrow of the Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson book. Yesterday, in the late afternoon, the Biden office put out a statement saying that the president has got cancer. And today has been filled with continuation of the outpouring of expressions of support for President Biden and his family, but also a lot of questions about what happened. And as I said this morning, it takes a lot to believe that the president was diagnosed so late in the progress of this cancer without any previous testing to isolate and identify the cancer, and also to believe that the timing was just a coincidence. And my inbox today was filled with notes from you all and from doctors, some I know, some I don't, and from Democratic operatives expressing doubt that the version of this story being told by the Bidens is 100% accurate. Some scored it quite a bit lower than that. So we're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about tonight when we get to your questions. But at first, we're going to drill down on some of this Biden stuff with our guests. Afterwards, again, your questions on that or any other topic, Russia, Ukraine, or anything you wish. If you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. If you're watching on X or YouTube, please adhere to the House rules of peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace extended to all. No smack in the chat. And then don't forget to stick with us at 7 o'clock. We'll go an extra hour tonight, and Steve Ballmer will join us to talk about USA Facts and how his organization is trying to help us all understand better some big public policy debates, including currently before us on taxes. So let's bring in our two guests, two gentlemen who have been here before. Marc Caputo, who here he is, who writes for Axios, and one of the two bylines on the big story broken over the weekend on Friday, and Michael LaRosa, who used to work in the Biden White House for the First Lady and has developed a well-deserved reputation for being fearless when it comes to speaking the truth. Welcome for you both. Michael, I'm trying to unmute you if you would, and Marc as well. Thank you both. Again, grateful to have you here. Marc, start with you. Whenever I break a big story, I hear from a lot of folks say, tell me how you broke it. And of course, you're not going to reveal your sources. But what can you say, if anything, about how you and your colleague were able to get this audio ahead of everybody else?
January 22nd, I started asking right after President Trump was inaugurated, started talking to the DOJ and the White House about it. And the version we were given is they didn't even know where the Hurt tapes were, and they had to go looking for them. And this was just a thing that I kind of regularly stayed on top of and worked various sources, and eventually it came out. A little backstory, apparently a Heritage Foundation was so mad that we had gotten this and that they didn't, that they started to complain and called for a leak investigation, which is kind of speaks to, I don't know, sort of the clown show that's operating over there at the Heritage Foundation. But maybe I shouldn't mock them too much, because who knows, maybe they'll sue me.
Yeah.
But I mean, bottom line is, in this business, if you want something and you want information, you got to have the Wayne Gretzky rule. You're going to miss 1,000 or 100% of the shots you don't take. So you got to take a bunch of shots.
So international exclusive, important story. Some organizations, I believe, now have also obtained it, right?
Yep.
You had it easily first. And again, you may not feel comfortable answering this, but we like to take people behind the scenes, and this is a certified scoop. What was in the interest of the government to give it just to you, as opposed to releasing it to the whole world?
Well, I can't say it was the whole government that released it to me, but
well, whoever did it, like, why did they choose? Why was that in their interest?
I have lots of sources, and they know me as a fair arbiter of the facts. And in 2019, a month after Joe Biden announced his candidacy, I wrote one of the first stories about questioning his age. And it was something that I was keenly attuned to early on. And then my co-author on this piece, Alex Thompson, has, as you referenced, a book, Original Sin, coming out, where they document rather extensively, and this is after my time of covering the Biden campaign. He covered the Biden White House. I didn't. The extent to which the people around Biden had and covered up, and whatever other verb you want to use, his mental state, his acuity, his interactions with people who would have noticed that, charitably speaking, he lost a few steps.
Michael, when you listen to the audio, or however much you listen to it, I'm sure you listen to some, does that seem to you like an aberration or an unusual situation, or is that pretty much how you think Joe Biden has been over the last few years or so?
That's how I remember him. I mean, I met him in 2019 as an older man. I worked for him as an older man. So that those tapes did not sound like anything abnormal to me.
And do you think people are reacting properly to them in terms of saying somehow that this is a revelation as compared to the transcript?
I don't know. I can't tell if they're different from if there's more if there's more of a wow factor or more reaction than the transcripts. He was confusing dates. I mean, he did that all the time too. She did as well. So I can't say that anything alarmed me or that spoke to mental acuity in the way that people are suggesting that there was decline, because to me that sounded like him.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about the cancer diagnosis, and Greg Gutfeld of Fox correctly said today that you can be concerned for the Bidens and for the former president and still have questions about the nature of the release and of his treatment. Here is Greg Gutfeld just a little while ago on the 5 on Fox number 3, please.
The absolute best. Greg, is it fair for some in the media, including David Axelrod now, to be saying that we should set aside any talk about the cognitive cover-up during his presidency as he battles this cancer?
When they say something like that, you have to believe that that's the reason why they're breaking the news now. So you do mute and you do pause. The timing is telling you that this cancer is being used as a tool to deflect from outrage to sympathy. But get this, normal human beings, we can have both. We can feel sad for somebody who has cancer. Like Harold said, we all know people intimately who have cancer, are dying from cancer, and who will die of cancer. So we could feel sad, but that's not going to infringe on the space in my brain that is reserved and dedicated to this cover-up of his incapacitation. So you're not going to get a mute or a pause from me, but nice try.
Okay, so one reason I like you two gentlemen, and one reason I like my friend Joe Scarborough and look forward to talking to him about all this, is we're just looking for the truth. We're not dogmatic. We're not saying Joe Biden was a vegetable and he didn't actually operate as president, nor are we saying there was nothing wrong with Joe Biden and he didn't suffer any cognitive decline. We recognize that he had good days and bad days, and that whatever reality exists for historians and for people in present day life to grapple with, it's a little bit gray. There's some fuzziness here, and I appreciate you two understanding that and operating that way. So, as Greg said, it's possible to feel sympathy for the Bidens and concern, but also wonder about this. One person who's wondering about the timing here is one of the people I know who's the most interested in gossip and reads social media obsessively, looking for different theories about things, and has never met a conspiracy theory he didn't like, at least if it was about someone he doesn't like. That's, of course, this gentleman. 2A, please.
Everybody, but it's given just about. And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9, I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him. Well, he said, if it's the same doctor, he said there was nothing wrong there, and that's being proven to be a sad situation. And the auto pen is becoming a very big deal. The auto pen is becoming a big deal because it seems like that maybe was the president who ever operated the auto pen. But when they say that that was not good, they also, you have to look and you have to say that the test was not so good either. In other words, there are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's 2 separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out.
If you understood every word of that, I feel very bad for you. First of all, there's no such thing as stage 9 cancer, but at least not that I know of. In any event, what you heard there was kind of a fever swamp melange, a souffle, a bouillabaisse, I don't know, just a lot of different
gumbo. That was a gumbo.
Gumbo. It was a gumbo. Thank you. It's a gumbo. In any event, that's what President Trump had to say. Now, here's what Hakeem Jeffries had to say, suggesting it's inappropriate to raise questions about President Biden. This is number 4, please.
Expectation that President Biden is going to meet this moment with the courage and resilience that he's consistently shown. Seems to me entirely inappropriate that at this moment in time, when President Biden is dealing with a serious and aggressive form of cancer, there are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theories and want us to look backward at a time when they actually are taking health care away from the American people. No, as House Democrats, we're going to look forward. They literally are trying to take health care away from millions of Americans at this very moment in the dead of night. And Republicans want to fan the flames of conspiracy theories at this moment? No, thank you.
Okay, so I see four strands to the Biden story. And gentlemen, I'm going to get back to you in a minute. I'm just unfurling some elements for your viewing pleasure. One strand is the Hurt tapes, which, because they came out on a Friday, Mark couldn't control the timing of his scoop, perhaps, hadn't gotten much attention over the weekend. I shouldn't say that. They got a world of attention, but they'd still be getting a lot of attention if it weren't for the Sunday announcement. So one's the Hurt tapes, which still requires some scrutiny if you're trying to have accountability and understanding. Two, the second strand would be the announcement of the cancer diagnosis. The third would be the book that's coming out tomorrow, which has been widely reviewed and read. So I'm not sure that the release is going to make much of a difference, although the authors will be doing more interviews, and that'll be interesting. And then the fourth strand is kind of the interaction between them all, right? It's almost impossible. The New York Times story, put up number 2, please. The New York Times story, if you have the luxury of being able to afford the New York Times, I recommend their story that's published now. Democrats pause their anger at Biden over 2024, but have new questions. The former president's cancer diagnosis prompted an outpouring of well wishes and sympathy, as well as some whispered uncertainties that reflected a lack of trust in what he says about his health. That subhead is brilliantly written, nuanced, and the article itself, it's really, hats off to the authors of this story, because this is a difficult thing to write about, both to be sensitive to what the Bidens are dealing with, but also to deal with the realities, to inform the citizenry, as we're trying to do here right now, about what's going on. So maybe the most important thing that happened today in terms of a data point was on Morning Joe, my friend Joe, with Zeke Emanuel, who's an expert in this area. He's a doctor, an expert in this area. He's a partisan Democrat, but he spoke truth this morning about the president's condition and raised a lot of attention and suspicion because of his view of what the chronology must be, or almost certainly is. Number 5, please.
You're an oncologist, obviously incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
So even though that occurred almost exactly 12 hours ago, it's still being widely quoted. There's some doctors who have dissented at least a little bit maybe from that, but it's significant. And I'm going to ask our guests about it in a second. I want to show you one more thing, and it pertains to one of the other strands, which is the book. This is a tweet from one of the President Biden's granddaughters, Naomi Biden, number 7. Michael, real quick, just tell people the role Naomi plays in the family.
She's the oldest grandchild. She's the most, probably the most outspoken, most visible grandchild of the Bidens. I like her a lot. I don't tend to fault the grandkids for coming to the defense of their grandfather. He's also had to, experience the sort of humiliation and degradation of her father, being weaponized, and she was always very, defensive of him as well.
She's Hunter's daughter, not Bo's.
Yes, she's the oldest grandchild, but she's the oldest daughter of Hunter's 3 daughters.
Yeah. All right. So here's her tweet. Some of you can read it, but she says the book is the Tapper Thompson book is political fairy smut. Gentlemen, is that a term of art that I don't know, or is that something she made up? Fairy smut.
Points to her for being original there, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I think it is. I'm going to Google it later. She says the book is political
Be
fairy
careful.
smut.
I may incognito window. If you,
yes,
you know.
I hear you.
She's a lawyer, so she's a good writer. So
yeah, I may start using that phrase. Why don't we get out of here with your fairy smut? The permanent professional chattering class, the ones who rarely enter the arena but profit from the spectacle of those that do. Put simply, it amounts to a bunch of unoriginal, uninspired lies written by irresponsible, self-promoting journalists out to make a quick buck. It relies on unnamed, anonymous sources pushing a self-serving false narrative that absolves them of any responsibility of our current national nightmare. All of this at the expense of a man so completely good and honest that it is impossible for these people to ever understand the why or how of it all. There are real stories to be told, and one day they will be. I suspect history will reward the truth. So, Mark,
the old Castro history will absolve me.
Yes, I don't want to put you in a position if you're uncomfortable defending your colleague, but I don't think the book is false. I think my criticism of the book largely is that it's incomplete, particularly in its failure to hold the media accountable. But first I want to go to Michael. Michael, it seems based on what Dr. Emanuel said and what other doctors have said, that there's very little doubt that Joe Biden has had this for a while. So the range of possible facts is, one, that he's known for a while he had it and it was covered up and not disclosed, which would be a pretty egregious violation of the public trust, or that the Bidens decided not to have him be tested for reasons I still don't quite understand, because most of the reasons someone his age wouldn't get tested don't apply to Joe Biden. So based on your knowledge of the Bidens, do you have a sense of how this could have happened?
No, I don't know how. I agree with you. I don't know why he wouldn't have been tested, other than I heard Zeke say some men in their 70s either aren't offered or don't need it because of that age.
As I understand it, and we have some doctors on here who will help us later, but it seems like they don't do it for some 70-year-olds because they'd rather not know, or didn't quite understand the explanation.
That's what I don't know either. But I'm going to get to the root of the question that I think you're trying to ask.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was on Fox News yesterday morning, and they asked me about some of this stuff, and I tried to explain it in that on day one of the White House, I started to notice, I'm talking literally, walking into the door. The usher was fired, the Trump usher. Now, we don't know who fired him, and there were a lot of reporters asking. I still don't know to this day whether we fired him or whether they fired him and why.
Who would they be? The
Trump team. And if he was fired, we don't know why he wasn't fired long before. Yeah. But then very, very quickly, Dr. Biden was apparently, according to Jim Acosta, who reached out to me, this is maybe 2 or 3 days into the White House, that he had heard a tip that Dr. Biden was going to lead the effort for family reunification. That was news to me, but apparently it was true. And I still couldn't get answers. And the way I'm explaining this is that they never want to give a yes or a no. And they never want, what I'm trying to tell you, and then we go on to the dog bites a couple months later with the Secret Service. And nobody could get me answers to give to the press. So what I'm saying to you is that they were so allergic to transparency about the smallest things that it always made me very nervous about what they would do when the big things came up. They did get caught lying about coverage of the wedding. I believe Ashley Parker and Katie Rogers both have quotes that I screenshotted at the time on Twitter saying both both White Houses have lied. This White House lies, but they're just too cute by half when they do it. And the answer was they always tried to hide the ball when they didn't have to. They always tried to come up close to the line, and I used to always fight against it. And, I was being accused of being too close to the press. Well, no, it's that if you're just transparent and you just get it out there, the news cycle moves fast enough that really nobody cares. And it's the best thing for you in the end. But they lived in a bunker mentality. And so everything to them was theirs. They didn't want to hear that holding a wedding at the White House was not what was part of public domain. No, it was private. It was a private. Well, no, it's not private. It's on a national monument. It's on the taxpayers pay for that house. If you want a private wedding, go to Camp David or go to Rehoboth. They thought everything was private. They did not want to share anything of the Bidens with anybody. And those were the people who really did the Bidens a disservice when it came to these decisions. And I'm breaking it down in very small, maybe trivial to some people, but that was the culture and that was how they approached everything.
Well, I'll go a little bigger here. And I'll defend my colleague's book. People should read it. One of the things you'll find in there is how the Biden family covered up the brain tumor problems that Beau Biden had. They had a doctor release a clean bill of health letter in February of 2014 after Beau Biden had surgery. 15 months later, he was dead. In between then, Beau Biden was being flown around the country for experimental therapies, and they were checking him into hospitals under a fake name. That's in the original Sin book, as well as other things. So that's a kind of a big example of the way Biden world sort of writ large would cover up issues related to cancer, health, and the like. And then obviously, while he was president, there were just a number of cases where you had the Biden operation were sort of constantly coming up with these sort of cockamamie ways of hiding the fact that President Biden was deteriorating. For instance, people noticed he had a very stiff and unnatural looking gait, the way he was walking. So the solution of some of these PR spinmeisters was like, let's just have a bunch of people surround him, like kids playing soccer around the ball. And that way no one will notice. And they had these sort of different solutions to sort of hide from the fact that everyone was seeing. And if I were attentive enough, I would remember the quote from Orwell about how the party's final command was that you deny what you see and what you hear. But that, by and large, was a hallmark toward the end of what the Biden administration was doing. This is not to forgive, excuse, or explain away what the Trump administration has done, will do, and is doing now. But since we're on that topic, I just think it's important to point out it wasn't just the small things. It was also large things. And sometimes it was actually about cancer in the case of Beau Biden and the family covering it up.
So let me say two things. Three things. One, President Trump and his administration are not truthful. They lie on a regular basis. And that was true in the first term, too. And two, the credibility of the Democratic Party, as we've said here many times, must be restored to an extent that people will listen to them. And this incident is of a piece with the practice of the Bidens over many years. So, Michael, did you ever talk to Jill Biden about how she met her husband?
Yes.
The circumstances under which they met, and
many times. And
yeah, was she worried? Was she worried that the true story would be reported widely?
Well, she was not worried. She knows now. Look, this was part of my job in that summer of 2020, and I went back and found everything, mostly everything that she had said had matched up. Now, there is some confusion, I think, over whether she had physically met him when her first husband, Bill, had thrown Biden a fundraiser in 1972. Jill was still in college. Bill was maybe also in college, a senior, or had just been out. Threw him a fundraiser. She doesn't remember meeting him then. She certainly does not. She certainly denies them, and her ex-husband will say has made claims that she was a babysitter for the kids, and she was not ever a babysitter for Bo and Hunter. She met him on March 7th, March 8th, I believe, the day of the Philadelphia Flower Show, 1975. But Mark, why?
No, I'll move on. No further questions on that matter. I've just never asked you about that. And because again, I'll stipulate, all our presidents have told lies, including the current one. But I think
Not
it's
George
a documented
Washington.
truth.
I think George Washington always told the truth.
I mean, she doesn't deny that she was, her divorce was finalized in May of 1975, and they met, went out the first date in March of 75.
Yeah. But they lied about Biden Inc. They lied about his decline in mental acuity. As Mark said, they didn't tell the truth about Bo. So I'll ask you a simple question, Michael. The people who are saying that they announced the cancer in order to, as a PR move, to deal with the herd tapes in the book, are the Bidens capable of telling less than the complete truth about the diagnosis for the purpose of trying to smother the book and the herd tapes? Are they capable of that?
As an orbit, yeah. I can't say that they're not. As an orbit, given how hard it was, it was pulling teeth to get them to be transparent on other things. I can't say that it wasn't held, or that it was like. And the truth is, I don't know. But to answer your question truthfully, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, Mark, where's, as a media story, as a news coverage matter, where do you think we are headed here? Is this about to be dropped? Will the truth out? What's your instinct about it?
Obviously, more information is going to have to come out, and more reporting is going to be done about what he knew and when he knew it. And this is just sort of a result of the way in which this was sprung. I did want to reverse for 1 second and go back,
yes, sir,
to those misty old days of Friday when we released the first report about the herd tapes. And something that Michael said earlier, when he saw Joe Biden, this is the Joe Biden he always saw. Those tapes, those recordings happened over 2 days, October 8th of 2023 and October 9th of 2023. And there's kind of two Joe Bidens there. The first day, he sounds phlegmatic, slow, forgetful, rambly. That's where there's that sort of dramatic, in a certain respect, moment where Joe Biden is unable to remember when Hunter Biden died, when Bo Biden died, even though Bo's death was the subject of the book, or when Donald Trump got elected, or those sort of basic facts. And hearing it for the first time, you just really get the sense of the toll that time had taken on Joe Biden, as well as grief. So that really added a texture and a dimension to it. Now, October 9th, that Joe Biden sounded a lot different, very clean, much sharper. And so that's one of the reasons you did hear, to a degree, a Biden world, the Biden White House, Biden campaign, Biden political operation, Biden Inc. coming out and saying, he was kind of perfectly fine. Some days he was fine, and some days he wasn't. One thing about, I do have to say, Biden's granddaughter coming out and attacking the book, I totally respect the idea that she's defending her grandfather and her family name. She should do it all the time. But there is a grand irony that the child of Hunter Biden is accusing people of making a quick buck. This is a guy who produced kind of, child art and was able to parlay that in hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales, when the reality was it was just buying access to his dad. And also when his dad was a senator and carrying, for instance, credit card legislation for the at-home Delaware credit card companies. Hunter Biden was miraculously a credit card lobbyist. So, charity starts at home here. It's the idea that these reporters are making a quick buck telling the truth about what happened doesn't quite add up.
Michael, did you want to say something about that?
Well, we don't have to relitigate Hunter. I've been, I was probably one of the only public advocates for Hunter, whereas people like Anita Dunn and Jen Psaki threw him under the bus. But I also don't feel like Hunter Biden did anything differently than most children of public servants who've made their name the same way I think Neil Bush cost the American taxpayer $1 billion that we never saw again. I don't think Hunter Biden cost us anything. I think Hunter Biden had problems, and he was a target-rich environment, and DOJ went after somebody for these first-time offenses that they typically don't do.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous
Well,
prosecution. Incidentally, the original Sin book does detail how Hunter Biden was among the most influential voices, telling his father, Joe Biden, to stay in the
Yeah.
race
I think
in 2024.
there's no doubt that both of them rely on Hunter is, you can make mistakes and you can have addiction problems and health problems and those kind of things, but you can be a very smart, a smart individual. I think Hunter's one of them.
Michael, Michael, I'm not sure you're right about the the Neil Bush amount. Not sure that's an accurate number, but
it was $1 billion. It was $1 billion.
$1 billion. Neil Bush personally cost the government $1 billion
personally, but his bank that he sat on the board of, that he did not have any experience in financial.
Yeah, that's true. You know the name of that bank. I'll give you a quarter if you know the name of it.
Oh wow,
Silverado Savings and Loans.
Silverado.
Wow.
Now you are right. Democrats at the time made an example of Neil. And that bank, but it was a symptom of a larger problem that was wrong, and they exploited him for sure. And like Republicans did to Hunter, but a little bit different.
And an elephant in the room, Donald Trump Jr. has had a number of doors open for him in the venture capital and financing world now that his father's reassumed office.
And Jared
did before. Business Insider wrote a piece really pulling the bark off of Donald Trump Jr. and comparing him to Hunter Biden, which caused Trump world to just absolutely lose its mind. So yes, to your point, Michael, this stuff does happen. I was nevertheless pointing out the rich irony of this silver spoon child of a silver spoon child, criticizing people for making a quick buck when that really has been a hallmark of this political system. And in the case of her father, her father's wealth and earnings.
Mark, if you could ask Joe Biden's doctor, who shamefully has never answered questions from the media, if you could ask him a couple of questions.
Yeah, why didn't you do the PSA test? My father is 80. He had prostate cancer a little while ago. That was obviously detected when he was doing tests. Why didn't you do the tests?
Yeah. Or if you did do the tests, why didn't you release the results?
I mean, they didn't release results showing that the tests had happened. That would be like, well, why did you lie and cover it up?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. There you go. All right, folks, we're going to bring you in again. Remember, stay with us at 7:00 hour Eastern time when Steve Ballmer will be here. Mr. Head, Dr. Head, welcome in. Unmute. Tell us where you are, what kind of doctor you are, and what's on your mind for Michael and Mark. There you go.
Hey, okay. I am a pulmonologist and lung doctor, and I wanted to comment on your oncologist that you had on this morning. I don't know what kind of feedback you've gotten on his conversation, but
quite a bit. But tell us what's on your mind about it.
Well, from a doctor.
But just so we're on equal footing here. Here he is.
Okay.
Boom.
All right. Good deal. Failure to
Wes, where do you live?
Georgia, north of Atlanta.
Okay. All right. You guys under AMA and Marcus of Queensberry rules have at it.
Yeah. But as a pulmonologist, one of my fears is failure to diagnose lung cancer. That is, I see people all the time with abnormal chest x-rays, CTs, and we work them up, prove they don't have cancer, but I never let them go. I never say you've been screened. Hardly. I will try to find any way that I can keep them under my care so that I can continue to follow them, because one of the worst things is for a patient that I have seen in the past to come back with a lung cancer. And if anybody I have ever seen develops a lung cancer, I want it to be me that finds it. And so I have a hard time thinking that any of his doctors would be comfortable saying he doesn't need to be screened.
Hmm.
That's
So
kind
what
of
you're saying, if I can just summarize what you're saying is you feel a responsibility that any patient under your care receive whatever screening, testing, imaging, etc. required to make sure that under your care they're not being diagnosed and treated if they have cancer. Is that a good correct summary?
right. I mean, there are people that are end of life from other reasons
Sure.
who don't need to be diagnosed with a cancer that will kill them in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but just to state take it from the abstract to the specific, if your patient were the president of the United States,
I would think his doctors would be, if I was his doctor and he said, I don't want to be screened for prostate cancer, I would have pushed back very hard on that.
Yeah. Len, up just to be honest,
Yeah.
Dr. Head has raised it, and I heard from any number of people who said that they found your framing of it to be insufficiently in line with the Dr. Head's point of view, that you didn't emphasize enough the absolute imperative for the president's doctor to have insisted he be tested regularly.
So as I said this morning, it's a nuanced discussion, a long one,
Yep.
and I put that blog up eventually today with a whole lot of information and perspective. And I think there are two different questions. There's the population question, which deals with millions of people, and there's the individual question. And this gentleman was president of the United States. That raises an entirely different spectrum as opposed to some generic comment. I can think of a number of scenarios where the physician may have had a discussion. The decision may have been made not to do screening. I can also tell you from a personal perspective, I've been screened for lung cancer. I wasn't screened for lung cancer, I was screened for another condition. They found a nodule and they wanted to do another 2 years worth of screening. And I knew at the time the world's experts, and no one would have recommended that I get additional screening. So we have there are a number of areas that we can bring out different examples. Sadly, this one's obvious. I even wrote in my blog about a scenario where he may have had the diagnosis, that it may have been an earlier stage or an earlier grade, shall we say, that they may have been watching it. I don't know if that's true. I think it's unlikely. It's highly speculative and a dangerous place for me to go.
Yeah.
But, he's president of the United States. I agree that's an open question, open for debate, and I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. It'd be outrageous if he were diagnosed and they didn't reveal it. But
not if he had grade 6, Mark. He may have been told, nothing's going. I'm not saying that's what happened. I think it's highly unlikely.
I understand.
I think it's highly unlikely.
I want to ask you both first, Dr. Head, if you could interview the president's physician and ask him a question about this matter, what would you ask?
I'd like to see his PSAs for the past few years going back.
Yep. Okay.
And I would say what I said here in the chat. Remember Jack Webb and Dragnet? The facts, ma'am, just the facts. I wish we had the facts, and then we can have a good conversation about the facts. And I think based on what's going on, and I've commented on that in other blogs, we didn't have the facts. Good days and bad days is not an excuse when you had your finger on the nuclear button. And I've said that in my blog. So give us the facts and let us make the decision and put, and answer some of the questions.
Doctors, thank you both. Very grateful to you. Thanks for coming on. Michelle.
It's especially true if you have stage 9 cancer. It's really, really serious.
Michelle, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm in Texas. Thank you for calling on me. Let me preface this by, let me preface this by saying that I'm not a medical professional, but I am intimately acquainted with prostate cancer. So my dad was diagnosed in 2021 at the age of 67 with aggressive prostate cancer. And this was really shocking to our family because my dad was the picture of health, maintained a healthy weight, healthy diet, exercised regularly, had no symptoms. His only symptom was a slightly elevated PSA. And he had regular screenings, and we made the tough decision for him to have a radical prostatectomy, which was a hard pill to swallow because the surgery was life-saving. Excuse me. The surgery was life-saving, but by all accounts, this was going to worsen his quality of life. And let me send the dogs out. So he has this surgery, and we went to the head of the department at UT Southwestern, and the surgeon said it's a good thing that you had this operation, because if your dad hadn't, he would have been dead within a year. It was so aggressive. And again, no symptoms. And so we think, okay, great. We got it all. He's in the clear. He took some lymph nodes. Lymph nodes were clear. Within 18 months, the cancer had returned, which means microscopic cancer cells had escaped into the bloodstream that didn't show up on a blood test or any scans. So at that time, he started radiation and ADT, androgen deprivation therapy, which they're talking about for President Biden. All that to say, this was devastating for our family. It was extremely hard treatment for my dad, and he was a really healthy, strong man. The thought that President Biden just got this diagnosis now is not plausible to me, number one. Number two, for it to have metastasized to the bones, that's extremely painful and extremely aggressive. And I don't even know if they would do the kind of surgeries and treatment that they were talking about on my dad for Biden at his age, especially someone who we know is in mental decline. I don't know that he could even survive those kinds of surgeries and treatments, because they are extremely hard. And we're talking about my father, who was 67 at the time, in optimal health. So none of this tracks for me personally. And so my point in sharing all of this is, Mark, you mentioned a few days ago, I think it was last week, that we don't have any knowledge that it wasn't Biden making decisions in the White House, that he was still in control while he was in office. And I don't know what's more concerning to me. Is it that he was in not only mental decline, but also physical decline, making decisions regarding national security? Or was someone else making those decisions? I'm not really sure what's worse to me, but both are a huge betrayal to the American people and our national security.
Michelle, thank you for that. I think I can speak for pretty much everyone, maybe everyone, say we hear both the strength and the sadness in your voice, and really grateful to you for sharing that. How's your family now?
Good. We are stable. My dad is, he completed all of his treatment, and he's cancer-free as of now. I mean, you'll never be completely cancer-free, but it's not detectable at this time. So Thank you. It's been a really hard, long journey, and so unexpected for our family. So it was long battle coming right out of COVID to get this news. So thank you for that. And my heart goes out to the Bidens. I wouldn't wish this on anyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. And again, we're so impressed by the strength and grace you're showing. So thank you. We're getting ready to do a show about cancer, regular weekly two-way. And stories like yours obviously are way too common in America. And of course, President Biden made the cancer moonshot and cancer research a priority as much or more than any other president. Michael.
And also, I mean, just in the First Lady's office for the 2.5 years, and I know for the rest of the time she was there, screenings was everything we did when it came to cancer. It was what she did, public education about screenings, breast cancer, all kinds of cancer. So that's why it's a little surprising.
Mark, question. Yeah, I agree. Mark, question or comment with Michelle?
No, I guess it's one of those things that everyone knows someone who has gone through this, and heart goes out to you.
Michelle, before you go, I'd love for you to share any thing your family learned from the process that you think other families going through cancer would benefit from?
Absolutely. And there are a few things. One being, there was a lot of debate, even amongst our family, about whether or not to get PSA tested, because we know that there are certain health conditions that can affect your PSA levels. Set that aside, put it out of your mind. I don't care what age you are. I don't care what underlying health conditions you have. Still get the PSA test, because you just never know. And if it is the one thing that is the indication of cancer, then it could be life-saving, number one. Number two, there's a relatively new MRI that's prostate specific. Insurance doesn't cover it for everyone, unfortunately, but it's called a multi-parametric MRI, and it's much more accurate at detecting prostate cancer. And that can sometimes preclude the need for a biopsy. Sometimes the biopsies aren't as accurate with the sample that they extract, and biopsies can be dangerous. They're going in through the rectum. So I would encourage anyone who is concerned about prostate cancer or thinks that they might have it. A multi-parametric MRI was really informative for our family and gave us a lot of information moving forward.
Michelle, I'll say finally, you know a lot for someone who's not a medical professional. Really impressive how much you learned. And I know you learned that to help your dad, and he's very lucky to have you as his daughter. And we're grateful to you for sharing all that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's get one more in here before we go to our next hour. Riley, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind, please.
Hey, I want to say first, Michelle, that was really touching. I appreciate you sharing that with the audience. And hey, I'm sorry to kind of drag it away from the U.S., but I had just heard before joining today that Canada, France, and Britain had all basically threatened Israel at this point with sanctions unless they began to let in aid. I get that the Biden story is huge in the States, but I can't help but wonder, like, is that kind of is that a sea change at this point? I'm curious, especially after when Trump was in the Middle East, snubbing Bibi. I can't help but think he's kind of a dead man walking now after today. So any thoughts that you have? I'm just very curious.
I had seen a report that the Israelis announced they were going to send humanitarian aid in. So I don't know if that was in reaction.
5 trucks. So I mean, it was 5 trucks again. I mean, I don't think that's going to be necessarily enough. Just more time to tell.
Yeah. Is your question, is Prime Minister Netanyahu's used up all of his 9 lives? Is that your question?
Tenure over at this point. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I don't bet against that guy politically. He seems to just survive and survive. Mark, thoughts?
One of the more interesting things that we probably haven't written enough about is how the Trump administration, how Trump has been less cooperative with Israel than prior recent administrations.
Yeah.
So I agree with you not to count out Bibi, but at the same time, his act is wearing thin with Donald Trump and probably more broadly with the American public. And
Michael.
The world public, apparently. Right?
Michael.
My go-to on these things are, have the hostages been released yet?
Yeah.
Riley, thank you. All good changing topics. That's fine. Okay. Let's get
Will Moss.
David, come on in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind after you unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I was listening earlier when you were talking about the strands of the Biden cover up, and it's hard not to think that the Bidens catfished America, and the cancer diagnosis makes it. I mean, not to downplay, not to be disrespectful, but today whenever I was listening to all this coverage of it, it's just hard not to see that there's a lot of correlations going on where they fooled the media, they fooled the Democratic Party, and if you watch Fox News during the 2020 campaign, there was a coverage every night that Biden had mental acuity issues or mental decline. I mean, Hannity talked about it nearly every night, but it's just hard not to feel like they pulled the wool over our eyes, and half the country still thinks they're in an active relationship. And it just feels like it's a big lie. And the media can't really admit or take responsibility, because then they're either saying that they're part of it, or they were fooled as well. So it just seems like there was a cover up, obviously, but I think that it's more sinister than that.
I think the media I think the media must acknowledge it to have a chance to restore credibility.
I agree.
Marc Caputo.
Yeah, hard to admit that what you're saying is by and large true. I think in some cases there were people who want to be lied to. I would like to go into more specifics, but my bosses don't want me to criticize my former employers, so I will be mindful of that. The thing I've said before applies here. Well, number one, Donald Trump does not lose in 2020 if there wasn't COVID and if he hadn't acted crazy. Okay,
sure.
So I do not buy that the election was stolen. You can't tell me that Joe Biden was a moron on one hand and then yet pulled off the sophisticated theft of an election. What is pretty clear is that Trump acted crazy during COVID and he paid the price. He damn near won in the Electoral College, but he still lost. The thing that you have to understand about the mainstream media, as national political coverage has become utterly disproportionately concentrated in New York and DC, is it is a part of the establishment, along with academia, with the intelligentsia of urban areas, whether be they sort of in Chicago or wherever else, places of kind of higher population, higher learning, higher income, and with the intelligence community, the foreign policy community, and the like. And Donald Trump was an outsider to this system, and the system reacted to Donald Trump in the same way that an immune system reacts to a virus. And a lot, not all, but a lot of the media's overreaction, and wasn't all an overreaction, was rooted in that sort of cultural response to Donald Trump, the outsider. And some common sense and best practices were checked at the door. And this didn't just happen with Joe Biden in 2020. It stretches back to 2016. And there has not been a full reckoning over this. And there should be a more robust discussion. And while I will hold true to my word and not criticize my former employers, I would love to have a lot of my former editors and the bosses who ran the show stand up and explain themselves, because guys like me have to field questions like this and are told, well, you need to keep your mouth shut because, it's bad form to talk about these things, but they should be talked about.
Brilliantly stated, Marc Caputo. Michael.
On the media, my learning period came in 2007, I think, as a diehard Hillary Clinton person. Got my start with the Clinton people. And I saw the media in a different way. I saw the media, to me, my experience watching, observing, and consuming media in 2007, 2008 was that this guy, Barack Obama, got the biggest free ride I had ever seen, that Hillary Clinton never got the benefit of the doubt, no matter what. And that there was a love story between the national media and Barack Obama, probably for a lot of reasons, not unlike the media that fell in love with John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan too, which, I learned over time, show business is just a part of politics. But that was my learning experience. And I ended up going in the media as a result of that experience. But look, the American people also got to see in 2019 and 2020 Joe Biden. He was old then. They got to make up their minds. He did win, and this is the ironic part. He did win by 7 million votes. It was not that close of election from the popular vote wise. It was maybe the eighth closest presidential race in history.
Michael, I apologize. I got to stop you. I apologize.
Yeah.
We're at the top
Thanks,
of the hour.
guys.
But Michael, thank you. David, thank you. And Mark and Michael, you're welcome to stay for our second hour. But if in case you happen to go, grateful to you for being part of it. As
I gotta
always.
write up a story here.
Go right. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And Michael, thank
Sorry
you.
for over talking
Hope to
again.
have you back soon. No. All good. All good. All right, everybody. We're rolling to our second hour now. And we're always on the lookout here for people who are using creativity for trying to make our country better, and particularly facts. Because as we all know, part of why two-way exists is to try to bring everybody together around a common set of facts. You can disagree with someone, but you can't invent your own facts. And you must think about what kind of organizations do we need to be a counterweight to the loudest angry voices on the national town square who use various modes, including social media, to present things that aren't factual. I know as a fact, Joe Biden had good days and bad days. I know that for a fact. And you don't need secret sources. You can watch C-SPAN and see State of the Union. Great night. He clearly was able to deliver that speech. The debate, bad night. Lots of examples, but facts so that we can have a national conversation based on real things. And so always on the lookout. Steve Ballmer decided to take his creativity and his intelligence, his connections, and build an organization called USA Facts. And the beauty of this is it takes government data and makes it accessible to the American people in a way that wasn't otherwise being done. So we're going to bring Mr. Ballmer in just a moment. But here, number 17, Sam, is a little bit of a new video coming out that'll give you an idea of the creativity and the reach of Mr. Ballmer's organization.
It's important to note that tax policy changes a lot, and it certainly drives a lot of what gets discussed in Washington, D.C. Here's how individual tax brackets have changed over the last 3 decades. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 reduced the number of brackets from 14, that's a lot of brackets, to just 2, with rates of 15% and 28%. Through the years, there have been 6 other big changes. The most recent, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, called the TCJA, but also called the Trump Tax Cuts. It lowered most rates from 2012, leaving us with 7 rates as of the date of this recording, which is March 17th of 2025.
All right, again, just part of the video that will be out soon. And now, joining us, first time on Two Way, Steve Ballmer. Steve, welcome in. Unmute yourself if you would, and grateful to you for joining. I cannot hear Steve. Can others hear him? No. All right, Steve's going to work on his audio. While he does that, I'll remind everybody, if you want to be in on the conversation, please raise your electronic hand if you're on the Two-Way platform. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, no smack in the chat for our guests. All right, Steve is unmuted. Try again. No. All right. Let's see. We'll work on that. Maybe we can help.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Hear you good.
Okay.
Welcome, and thank you for joining. Very grateful to you for being part of this. And how many takes did that video require?
It depends. It depends on how you think about things.
Yeah.
You could say it was one take that took us many hours. Yeah, it doesn't really take that long. We work hard on a script and then we go in and film it. And sometimes it'll take me twice to not stumble over my words. But, all told, I'd probably take 4 or 5 hours in the studio for.
Well, very nice performance and really incredible graphics. As someone who's worked with graphics my whole career, you and your team have an eye for how to explain this stuff. I want to ask you about your organization, and I want to move to the question of taxes, which is the subject of this new video. How did you get the idea for the organization, for USA Facts? How did it come about, and how did you implement it?
Yeah, it's actually sort of a funny story how I got there. I retired. I was CEO of Microsoft, retired 11 years ago, and my wife wanted me to get involved with our philanthropy, focused on kids and families in which the kids probably don't have a shot at the American dream by virtue of the circumstances of their birth. And I was kind of tired. And I said, no, I don't need to work on that. We just need to pay our taxes because the government really takes care of all of that. And let's be happy taxpayers. And, she said, no, we can do better than that. Come on. So, of course, I did. But I had a little bit, maybe it's only my disease. I'll call it a little spousal disease that said I really wanted to prove her wrong. In order to do that, I had to start looking at what really happens, who pays taxes, who benefits from taxes paid. And I found it very hard to see something that was well integrated at the federal government level, let alone state and local government. And I don't think you can really consider these things without looking at state and local government. For example, state and local governments pay for Medicaid, they pay for part of transportation. So how do you put these things together and look at them coherently? I started kind of bumbling around, looking for stuff, not finding much on the internet. I had a TA in a class I was teaching at Stanford, spent a little extra time. I met an economist, not that we want economic analysis or forecasting, just what has happened, not why it's happened, just what's happened. And he knew his way really around government databases very well. And eventually I decided the organizing kind of framework should be like a 10K report that public companies have to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, they are bland. They give the numbers. Here's how much we did in revenue. Here's how much we did in expenses, blah, blah, blah. We don't explain why. We don't give forecasts for the future. You got to have full context. You can't not talk about part of the business. But that's what I would have wanted to, that's what I used to read when I wanted to understand another company. And it's really what I wanted to read to understand the government. Numbers are important. Adjectives are partisan. Numbers are not partisan. Forecasts are partisan. I used to think they weren't because they, economics, which was kind of my major, is a science. But of course, then you can't have a right-wing economist and a left-wing economist. So I decided no forecasts unless they're official forecasts, for example, by the for Social Security, trust fund, et cetera. And we don't do any causality. We're not going to try to explain to you why X, Y, Z are happen. Just here's the numbers. Here's what's going on. And it's, kind of reflects my personality. I'm a skeptic. I don't want people interpreting things for me because then I'm never sure what their axe was to grind. And so we put that together. We actually write every year a 10K to keep ourselves intellectually honest. When you get into it, of course, the purpose of government is not profit and loss. So you actually do have to write about outcomes. What are our educational outcomes every year? What is the standard of living for people? What is their income? What does standard of living look like after you receive, whatever transfer payments you're going to receive? So that's long-winded story, but that's how I got here, Mark.
Okay. And when your organization is working, when USA Facts is achieving its mission, what does that look like?
To me, it's actually kind of 3 or 4 different things. First of all, I'd like to reach a broader than narrower swath of Americans. If you told me we were only for politicians and I call them the wonks, policy makers, economists. No, I'm not investing in this for that purpose. I'd like us to get to tens of millions of Americans. Hundreds of millions, probably beyond our reach right now, because you got to like numbers or at least charts a little bit, and you got to be interested. Not everybody's interested, but I think there's tens of millions of people who fall into the category. We don't reach tens of millions of people yet on a regular basis. I think we need to be able to meet people where they are. Some people like shorter snippets. We're trying to avoid giving you like a politician does. They'll pick one number completely out of context. And so we try to avoid that, but we need some shorter things. So we do have some social media information that we put out there. Some people really are willing to sit patiently. And so we have our longer form reports. We have these 15-minute videos that we do. And we're trying to find also submittal. We do video now in addition to doing text. We've got a newsletter. We've got over 550,000 subscribers, which says there is interest in this kind of stuff out there. I think on YouTube now we're closing in on 100 million views of our videos. So there's definitely a there in terms of what people are interested in. And if we can help educate people, they have to decide what to do with it. If they understand a little better, if it changes their opinion, if they talk to a friend, if they call a congressperson, so much the better.
So who's your ideal consumer of your information? A parent, a taxpayer? Who's the ideal?
I would say certainly taxpayers. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, we're not going to have everybody interested in this topic any more than we're going to have everybody in the world engage with, various media outlets and podcasts. But there is a group of people there. I don't want just the narrowest group of people who are hyper interested. So I think it's better to say taxpayers is probably a better description.
Right.
I don't want just sort of the most educated elite. I'd like a broader audience than that. I think that's important. And yet, because we do believe in numbers and charts, there are very smart people who just don't think in numbers the same way. And I'm not saying we want to be just for people who are math heads, but you got to feel a little bit comfortable around, some of the kind of stuff that we present.
Right. A question I know you get all the time. It's important. Where does the data come from? And what do you do with it to make it different than just somebody going to a government website?
The truth is we get all of our data just from government websites. If it's like a 10K report that, government, that a public company produces, you only use the company's data. You don't say, I'm going to tell you what somebody else says about our business. You say what we say about our business. So we only use government sources. We use about 100 different government databases to do our work. The thing government does not do, or the two things government doesn't do, number one, it doesn't present itself very well. It's not as if somebody says, hey, Census Bureau, please make your stuff approachable and simpler to digest than all of these detailed database reports. It just doesn't happen. Same thing with any other government database. The second thing nobody does is try to integrate these things. So we're trying to do something holistic. And it's certainly the case that let's say the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're not paid to integrate their stuff any more than they are to make it readable. You want my dream? My dream is that work just like a public company, and Congress and the president are required to produce the kind of report we do and actually sign that says, I have read this and this accurately reflects the state of what's going on in our government. That's what CEOs have to do.
Right.
In my dream, and I know it's a dream, and it's not going to happen while I'm alive, government should have the same level of accountability, both as to the accuracy of the data and acknowledging that people actually have read and know what the data is.
Okay, a few more questions for me, and then you all will get your chance to ask Mr. Ballmer a question. So if you want to be in the conversation, you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. Just tell folks sort of like the cycle of what you do. So how often are you getting new data? How often are you publishing things? If people really want to, go to usafacts.org or go to your social media, how often will they see new things?
Yeah, we update our databases as the data gets updated on the government website. So 100 different databases that get updated on different schedules. What we're trying to do now is to get to real-time availability of the data. So we don't take as much processing time, and we have some new technology techniques that we're using for that. Now, we assemble this in various forms. We publish our newsletter essentially weekly, sometimes even a little bit more often. We have articles that we put into those newsletters. We have social media. You'd see us on Instagram and X, etc., even TikTok. Pretty much every day we'd be putting something new out. We're reports. We write our 10K and our annual report, no surprise, once a year. And now we've taken to doing videos. I can't say we have a regular publishing schedule, but we have 6 or so videos coming out in the first 7 or 8 months of the year. Just to give you a sense of flow. Best thing to do, subscribe to our video channel on YouTube, come to our site. The other big source of traffic for us is we do a very good job of search engine optimization. So on certain topics, you're likely to get steered to us by Google, or I have to mention Bing since I'm a Microsoftie at heart. But we do that as well.
Why hasn't Bing done better to get more market share?
We came to market a little too late.
Yeah.
There are your product is better the more traffic you have.
Right.
And that built let me call it a virtuous cycle for Google. Now I would say Microsoft's got a pretty damn comparable product, but it's hard to get back in the game. They have more advertisers, so they get more dollars essentially per view than you do on Microsoft, which means they can pay more to people like Apple to buy traffic.
And they became a verb.
They became a verb. It's always nice to be a verb.
Yeah. What do you think of Doge as from the point of view of government data?
Doge is interesting because Doge isn't about government data. Doge is a user of government data.
Right.
They are trying to drive some notion of what efficiency looks like, and they are a user of data. Some of it is our kind of data. Some of it is, we have not gone through, for example, all the grants that various agencies have made, which, Doge has certainly spent some time on that. And Doge does have an agenda. There are certain things they think should change, and the data that they tend to surface. And I'm not saying they're different than anybody else in government, right, left. People do have agendas and try to make things happen. The thing I think is important when in these discussions, at least I would want Doge to do, is always put in context. We're saving $50 million, but we're also telling you that we're going to reduce our deficit by $1 trillion. Giving the context, where does government spend its money like we do? Therefore, if we want to trim $1 trillion, there's like 7 things that account for 92% of federal spend. So if you're not cutting any of those 7, it's going to be hard to come down by $1 trillion. And the 7 are obvious: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense spending, interest on the debt. You include state and local, then you get education, and then programs designed to support people who are less affluent outside of the Medicaid support.
Right. How is USA Facts using AI now, and how will you use it in the future?
Yeah, we're actually using AI really well now to help us comb these government databases and bring the data together. So talk about it now as a tool to help us do our job. We have a whole set of tools we use to make sure we don't wind up with hallucinations. That's obviously a value proposition to our customers. We even have the AIs check each other to make sure we get the same result from 2 different systems. They check each other's data. So we're using it to assemble our back-end database. The next generation work will essentially let us take that accurate data and then put a bot on top of it so that you can have an interactive discussion about government data with, if you will, our chat bot that doesn't speak to the open internet. So you're not getting third-party opinions. It only works against the government data that we've assembled.
And is that there yet, or that's coming?
It's coming. It's coming. Unfortunately, I know a little too much about software to want to say specifically what the date will be, but it's not a dream for the distant future. Hopefully we can get something out this year.
Great. That would be very powerful. All right, let's go to your questions again. As always, unmute. Tell folks where you are in case they don't know, and your question about USA Facts for Steve Ballmer. First is Erica. Welcome.
Hey, Mark, thanks for calling on me. I'm really enjoying this. It's more of a comment, but what I loved about the video at the beginning was that I was left having no idea what Steve's opinion is on the tax plan that he was discussing. And because I spend most of my time thinking about K-12 and curriculum and bias in schools and sort of agendas and what's presented to kids, we almost never see anything that's like the video you just showed. And so I don't mean to give him extra jobs, but if I would love it if other people could be thinking about ways to get that kind of content in front of students, you know, regardless of red state, red city, blue city, because students are not getting that. They almost never see something, especially on an issue that's political in nature, which is so many of the issues, especially now. They never come away not knowing what they're supposed to think. And I just loved that video because I was like, oh, this is great. The guy sounds so intelligent. This is so helpful to me to understand it. And I don't even know where he lands. And that's exactly how I feel like it should be more often. So really just a comment that if anybody listening or watching has thoughts about how to make this happen for kids about things other than tax policy, I think it would be a huge service to the country.
Erica, thank you. And Steve, it's a brilliant insight because I've looked at a lot of your stuff, and Erica's right. You guys clearly spend a lot of time crafting the language, building the graphics to have the ability to communicate with anybody without them saying this is a left-wing thing or a right-wing thing.
Well, we will be trying to, we have 50 people, which is a lot, but it's a little relative to the whole problem. But what we hope to do is find over time a curriculum partner or partners who might want to do something with this. I actually bemoan civics education because I think civics education doesn't go quite far enough. You can understand a lot about our government without actually understanding some of the key things you're going to want to know later. How much taxes do I pay? What does it go for? We do need to know there's 3 branches of government and a system of checks and balances. But I think we should probably be teaching a little bit more civics because government does pop up in people's day-to-day lives. And I don't think, and oh, by the way, I think you could teach math by using our stuff too.
I
Erica,
suspect
thank you.
so. Thanks.
Great question. Great comment / question. Appreciate it. Let's go to, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. You've been before. Michael, what is it?
Yeah, Michelle, you got it right.
Michelle, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Tell us where you are and your question for Steve Ballmer.
I'm originally from Iran, but I've spent almost half of my life in Los Angeles, California now. But I wanted to say thank you for this show. Because of your show, I almost called the electoral map 100. I did call the electoral map 100% for the election. And it's not a question. I was just thinking with the deepfakes and these, videos getting really good. I was just thinking you cannot tell the difference between I cannot tell the difference anymore. And one way to fight that, I was thinking, would be document what the politicians, what these people in power, in office are saying, and basically have a database connected to ChatGPT. And so like a known database. What do you think would be ways of fighting these deepfakes? Because they're getting so good, basically.
Great question. Steve, can you tackle that one?
It is a great question. I mean, I do think one of the things that will wind up being super important is to either view or read these things off of the website of the provider. And authenticity of website is easier to tell than most things. But if you want to share them or put them in other places, take YouTube as an example, we are going to have to find ways to chain back and essentially verify authenticity with the original publishing site. It'll be essential, and it's not been on the top of our queue because I know it's something the technology industry is working on more broadly, and I'll count on my old old friends at Microsoft and some of the other great technology companies to solve these problems, because I know they're on their minds.
Michelle, thank you for the question. Much appreciated. Now, Steve, there's somebody here who says a former Microsoft employee. For some previous CEOs, I'd be a little worried about bringing in former employees, but I happen to know you were beloved by the people of Microsoft. So I bring in Tom without any fear that he'll say anything except what a wonderful boss you were. Tom, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for your former boss.
Yeah, I'm in Silicon Valley. I was an intern in 2002 and a blue badge from '03 to '05. So appreciate connecting with you, Steve. I had a question about, I think part of the premise of what you're doing assumes that people are able to consume the data and interpret it. And even though you make it easier, I wonder if, maybe building on the earlier comment, if there are efforts to help kids develop critical thinking skills and data-driven kind of scientific method thinking skills, then they would be able to consume all this great work that you guys are doing. Because I worry a little bit that it'll be relevant to 10%, but those of us, we're already into the data. We're not reaching, the folks that flip elections.
Yeah, big challenge, Steve.
Yeah, there's kind of two parts to that. Part number one is, we only have 33%, maybe it's 31 off the top of my head, I may be off a couple percent, of kids in 8th grade are proficient in math. Unless and I found, I did a talk one time and the moderator gave me a problem from an 8th grade math proficiency test. Well, I'm a math major, but you could just see the blood drain out of the people in the audience saying, shoot, I'm not sure I could do that. So I do think we got to start with better math proficiency for a higher percentage of people. Unfortunately, that's not ours to solve. And if we're really going to be nonpartisan, man, we got to stick with numbers. We do, because every adjective, in my opinion, is partisan. If you say 2 is much bigger, 2 is double what it used to be, and we're really talking about something that can vary between 1 and 100, and it went from 1 to 2, is that adjective really helpful? Or is that adjective potentially confusing? If you said something goes from 1 to 2 out of a total possible of 100, guess what? You have enough context then to make a decision. So I'm not sure we'll get there for people who aren't somewhat comfortable with numbers and pictures of those numbers. But our society does need to work on math and language arts proficiency skills. They're just too low, in my opinion.
Tom, thank you. Very grateful to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mark.
Steve, do you imagine that if you do find an education, a curriculum partner, that the content will have to be changed to be more accessible to kids of different ages, or is the current content meant to be accessible to anybody?
No, the curriculum provider would definitely need to do some work with us to be in an appropriate level, both in terms of where people are in their comprehension, as well as, if you will, age and what their interests might be. No question. Now, I've taught this class 4 times, a seminar at Stanford. I did not need to change the material, but that's a very elite group. The question is, what would you need to do for, let's call them high school seniors, and those who are more proficient, less proficient in math? We need curriculum partner to really work with on this.
Okay. Young Kim, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, after you unmute, and what's on your mind for Steve Ballmer. One more time.
There it goes. Is that good? Good.
Yes.
I just got the stun, so I'm calling in from New York near Chappaqua. Thank you for taking me. I thought about a sports question on data as a sports franchise owner, but I'm going to switch. I just wanted to talk about healthcare because I wanted to segue with we talked about the Biden and his health. And I guess the question is, you must have thought about this, right? To introduce data science in healthcare. This is an important need right now. I used to be a faculty member at Hopkins and at Vanderbilt, and when I have medical students or undergraduates or who are interested in healthcare, and I keep on telling them, there's a huge need for health data scientists in medicine right now, a massive need, because we have mounds of data and we don't know what to do with them. We do not know what to do with them yet. There's a lot of progress. So I guess my question to you, Mr. Ballmer, is how do you see data science shaping up in healthcare?
Yeah, and I'll speak to that about which I know something and not that which I do not. I'm not an expert in the healthcare field. I can't imagine that there's any field at all that won't be heavily impacted by better use of data. I have a buddy from Microsoft who started a company that focuses in on collecting data on electronic medical records on behalf of hospitals and making it more digestible. So there's certainly a need. Now, if I put on my USA Facts hat, let me tell you some basic things which I would love to have data to characterize. What do we really spend our healthcare money on? I would like to be able to present how much is spent in the last year of someone's life. Or after they got a certain diagnosis. How much is spent on various disease classes? How much is spent not only by government insurance programs, VA, Medicaid, Medicare, government employee and pension, but also will government collect any of that as it relates to private insurance? In terms of thinking through and making policy, I think those are important things. And there's a need for more data, better data. That data does not exist in a good form. I have an outside partner who thinks they may have cracked the nut, so to speak. But, and we'll only do it our way, i.e. with government data. But I think if you want to really talk about our healthcare system, and you want to talk about what it costs and what kind of outcomes it gets, you need to look at those things. I actually think, and we do a pretty good job of this, you need to look at the non-healthcare factors. Who knows whether it's the things I do outside the healthcare system that affect my health more or the things inside the healthcare system? I don't know. But certainly, do I exercise? People think that might make a difference. Do I walk every day? Am I obese? Do I drink? All of those things are viewed as having an impact on health. And it's almost easier to paint that picture with the available data than some of the details of what the doctors and hospitals are actually doing.
Young Kim, thank you. Hey, Steve, can USA Facts answer the questions you just asked? Because they were perfectly phrased.
Not at this time. We don't have the government data. I'm not sure the government has the data in exactly the right form. This would obviously have to start someplace in DHS, in the Health and Human Services. At least for Medicare and Medicaid, I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of what they have at some point. It will be able to be available in a way we can make sense of it.
Yeah. Young Kim, thank you. And you opened the door to my asking a couple sports questions. Who do you, your Clippers, your beloved Clippers did not make it past the early rounds, but who do you like of the teams remaining? Who do you like to win the title?
Oh, asking you which of your competitors you want.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you rooting for your conference or are you rooting for the other conference? You have Western Conference pride?
Yeah, I would say some Western Conference pride. I think, it's exciting. Of the four teams, I mean, just from a league perspective, which is probably the only perspective that's worth having for me at this stage, there are three teams that have never won a title and a fourth team that hasn't won one since 1973.
Right.
That'll be, and ironically, with the exception of New York, they're all from what we term small markets. And there's certainly been a push at the league level to enable more competitive parity and not have everything benefit to larger markets like LA. So I think you could say, quote, the system's working. And, whether it's Indiana or Oklahoma City or Minnesota or big bad New York, we'll see.
All right. And what advice would you give someone who wants to build an arena from scratch?
Be prepared to give it a lot of time over a lot of years.
Yeah.
And it's never going to, in software, they say there's only 2 out of 3 things you can get between quality, design, and cost. Sorry, schedule, design, and cost. And guess what? Same thing applies to arenas.
You can only get 2 of the 3?
Mm-hmm. We got schedule and we got design.
Yeah. Okay. And
we spent a little more than we thought than we were planning.
Yeah. That's true in a New York apartment renovation too. What's the amenity in the arena you're most proud of or you like the most?
Oh, the thing I like the most is actually just the feel of the actual bowl where you sit and watch the games. It's tight, it's intimate. In a basketball game, it pulses with energy. We have one wall that's very steep, no suites. It's like a college gym. It just look, sport, live entertainment. You got to say what's better than just watching online, and the answer is it's got to be something of the intimacy and energy that people bring, and I think we kind of nailed it on that.
Yeah, I typically watch on TV. I live less than a mile from Madison Square Garden, and I went to the game 6 on Friday night, and I was reminded, ain't nothing like being there. It's an incredible experience. All right, let's go back to talking about data after our sports interlude. Jen, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are. Jen's in Oklahoma. It's got one of those 3 remaining small market teams. Jen, thanks for joining. Question for Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, I am an enthusiastic viewer and user of USA Facts. I'm a graphic designer, a 40-year career. I'm certified in data visualization and have done countless thousands upon thousands of charts and graphs in my career. I've used a lot of government data. The key with government data is often the gaps that one finds in the footnotes. How do you all deal with that when you're presenting that? Now, a good example would be FBI crime data. In the footnotes, you'll find out that there's some very key metropolitan areas that no longer provide data to the FBI. So it totally skews the data. So how do you all deal with that kind of thing when you're determining what you're going to put out there and how you're going to make it look, et cetera?
Fantastic question. Steve.
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. You say no longer. Some of those cities never provided data, just to be fair. And, we don't know. Some of them may have high rates. Some of them may have low rates of crime. Every city publishes something. They just don't publish necessarily everything. If you go back and look at the city level data, there's 2 things: what gets rolled up by the FBI and what is only available. It turns out it's also true that the definition of a crime is not the same everywhere. What constitutes, for example, a violent crime versus a property crime, definitions are different across different police jurisdictions. What do? We footnote.
Yeah.
We'll tell you what we got and what we don't have. We'll tell you what the database is. If somebody wants to go say, okay, what are they really presenting? And sometimes, there are important things that even we miss when we first go through because they're not even that well documented at the government database level. I'll give you an example. When it comes time to what state governments spend, the federal government does a roll-up. The roll-up takes about 2.5 years. But the roll-up that comes from OMB, from census, and from the states are not necessarily the same. People don't even call the same, or people may book things, if you will, into different categories. So we know the data is inconsistent. We just cite our source and move on. It's the best we can do, but we do make sure to document. If you go to any of our detailed material, we document it. If you're looking at a TikTok, no, you probably won't see any footnotes.
Well,
Jen, go ahead.
To say one of the things I can say is, having looked at, many, many visualizations over the years, You all do a fantastic job of telling the story and not their story. You know, you're not trying to push a particular thing. And I so respect that. So,
Jen,
yes.
I used to be a graphics PA, so I know why I think Steve's graphics are so good. Just explain, as someone with your professional eye, why you think they're so effective.
They're not trying to overcomplicate things. They're showing it with some simplicity. Helps kind of get rid of a lot of the clutter. I think that you'd be surprised over the years how many CEOs and other people have asked in their annual reports to actually make the charts very complicated so that nobody can understand them. You know, that was their goal. So it's your goal is clearly that you really do want people to be able to see things. And the way things can be annotated can help them kind of understand also. And the use of color. You use color not to make it look pretty. You use color to help the brain assess what you're trying to say. And it makes a huge difference in visualizations.
We're going to try something new later this year where you can pause a video and then interact with it, i.e. be able to, post some questions or surrounding context. We'll bring you more based upon where you start. I think we're going to wind up with some preliminary stuff first that people are, but I think it's an important way to enhance the value somebody can get around videos, to have some interactive aspects. My wife tells me she likes our videos, but she always wants to rewind them to make sure she remembered the last thing. So doing some things that can help, I think, will be valuable.
One of the real key things in just very simple movement in video is seeing a graph more from like where it was 5 years ago and where it is today, because what's really makes a mental impression is the change over time and where those changes are. And when you're comparing two graphs side by side, that can be hard for a lot of people to visually see.
Yeah. Jen, thank you for that. Steve, I'd like a data video that I can walk into, like I'm Mary Poppins or Bert, and be like right inside the data. So I don't need penguins. But I do need to be able to walk right in. Or like on ESPN when they walk back to the back of the set and suddenly they're on the court. Something like that.
Mark, does that mean you want a spoonful of medicine?
Whatever it takes.
Sugar to make that medicine go down?
Whatever it takes. Absolutely.
Can I say something about arenas?
Yes, ma'am.
I have never been in arenas, but back in the day when I went to several NBA games around the country, Market Square Arena in Indianapolis was my favorite because there was not a bad seat in the whole place.
Yeah.
It's one of my two favorites that isn't ours.
What's the other one?
I loved Utah's done a remodel now that they have hockey, but last time I was in, it was basketball only. And though a lot of energy, and I like the character and feel in Indiana. At one point, I actually told our guys, why don't we just copy Indiana and be done? But we decided we'd do a little something different.
Yeah. Market Square is great. Jen, thank you. Very grateful to you. And appreciate your analysis. Is excellent. Matt, welcome in. Tell folks after you unmute where you are and what's in your mind for Steve Ballmer.
Oh, hi. So I'm here from Central New York, Finger Lakes area, with two of my favorite people. So, Mark, I was a Note subscriber back to 2004.
Thank you, sir.
Following you for 20 years. Haven't missed an episode of the morning meeting yet. And Steve, I've been a Microsoft fanboy even longer than that. So I did an internship at Apple, but XP won me over. Owned every model of the Surface for I don't know how many years, and anyway, I love it. And then you bought a company where I was very early on, Tell Me Networks. So you've been very good to me, Steve. Anyway, I love this initiative, and I just have a thought for you. And it's not just a Doge question, but with the budget trimming, there's a lot of contractors being shed. Employee retirements not being backfilled. And one thing that I've come across, I'm a professor, a social scientist, is that it could be that many sources of government data are backpedaling or shuttering. And so, for example, I work with patent data from the innovation data from the patent office. And by law, they have to post the patents every week, but that's a very user-unfriendly data set.
Yes.
And so they've had a subcontractor kind of pretty it up for real people to use, but that contract almost didn't get renewed. And it's unclear if it will get renewed in the future. And so my question is, to what extent do you see USA Facts as kind of taking this raw, I mean, in general, you take raw data and make it consumable, but like how deep do you plan to go? And don't worry, I don't work for the subcontractor. I know you don't do grants. I'm not asking for a grant or anything, but do you see the organization's mission as sustaining some of these critical data resources that the government might start to step back on?
Yeah, again, Republican or Democrat administration aside, we are advocates for government publishing data that helps citizens understand what's going on. I think, right now, so far, not much data has gone away. We are a little worried, for example, in the Department of Education. I'm silent as to whether there should be a department, not be a department. That's how politicians choose to run things. We do think that there's 6 essential data sets that get published by the National Center for Education Statistics. Not every piece of information published by government actually do I think is necessary to be published, but I think there are some essential ones. There have been staff cuts in the National Center for Education Statistics. Worries me that some data might disappear. We published an open letter to Secretary McMahon, just stating why we think this data is important and what data it is. And we will be advocates for data. It's not our job to criticize or not criticize, but there's data I think is essential. There's a quote from James Madison. I know I won't get it exactly right, but let me sort of try it, which is a popular government without popular information or the ability to acquire it is a prelude to a tragedy or a farce or a tragedy or even worse. And that's kind of how I feel about our government. We need to do that, and there needs to be sufficient data for citizens to understand what their government is up to. Different people can think different things about sufficiency. On that, we do have a point of view that we will advocate for.
Steve, I looked up the quote by using Bing, just to be a good host. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy or perhaps both. What a great quote.
Yeah, I think it's inspiring to me. And our founders really understood this. They really did.
Yeah.
There's a thing called the State of the Union. There's a thing called the census. You have Madison with that quote. They understood we needed information. We do a thing called the State of the Union by the numbers. But in some senses, in the president's address, it would be good to be able to be a little objective, but it's just not what the State of the Union is anymore. We got to ground in some of this Madison philosophy, if you will.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. Grateful to you for coming in. Steve, you mentioned the letter you wrote to the Secretary of Education, and again, you caveated it correctly that you're not weighing in on the politics of it, but explain what the letter was and what kind of reaction it got.
Yeah, I mean, we basically said, hey, look, it is important to be able to understand educational outcomes in the country. Here are the 5 databases that we think are 6. I don't remember the precise number. We name them. We think are very important. We think they're important not only if the perspective is that the states are responsible for education, it is still valuable for people to see the roll up, particularly the federal government, because the federal government still puts money into the K through 12 education system, for example. And it can be valuable. My life experience is it is valuable to let people understand the workings of other people who do the same thing. So would it be valuable for the educators and people who are interested in education in Georgia to see the outcomes of Michigan, to be able to compare and contrast not just outcomes, but inputs, class sizes, absenteeism rates? I believe that the federal government, if you're going to put that stuff together in a digestible form, the federal government can do that. So even though education is local and people can debate, I mean, it's obviously local. There's obviously support for the federal government. But to whatever degree you think this is only a state's issue or partly a state's issue, letting states compare themselves is a helpful way for them to figure out how to get better.
Have you thought about Japan facts or Greenland facts?
Yeah, when we started, actually, we played around with Swiss facts. My dad's an immigrant, or was an immigrant from Switzerland, and we had a Swiss guy I knew here. And the problem is our whole framing is done around our Constitution. We use the prologue of the Constitution, provide for the common welfare, et cetera, et cetera. We use that as our framing mechanism. And without that kind of deep understanding, it gets really hard. And we said, okay, could we ally with people in other countries? I think until we have our underlying technology platform far enough advanced, it's just too much work. And if we can only make our contribution here in the US, that's fine. I mean, heck, we don't even use like OECD data in our site because it's not US government data. Unless the US government publishes it itself, we won't use it.
All right. Steve, you seem like a bright guy, but here's a guy whose son at least is a genius. I don't know if Chris Taylor's a genius, but his son is a genius. Chris, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Great shot behind you. What's on your Steve? Chris is out west, but Chris, tell folks in Idaho. Tell folks what's on your mind for Mr. Ballmer.
Okay, actually, so this print behind me is this was on my grandfather's wall. It's the county election. I forget the author, but from 18 something early, and it's interesting site. Speaking of my grandfather, my grandfather started a what is now the largest Christian publishing company, a privately held Christian publishing company in the States. He had a banner on his wall next to this image. I think it was from Socrates. It's been a long time, but it was something like the hardest thing to do is to figure out how to give your money away. Like I took it as like, who are worthy recipients? He took care of his grandchildren by helping us with our education. So we got something like half our college paid for. He had 28 grandkids. But as a sole owner of this large company, he must have given away certainly more than 100 million, a lot of money. And so my question is, here in your first statement here, that you started this because you thought that your tax dollars would take care of philanthropy, and then you realized, no, you need to do it yourself. But then you wanted to go back and kind of investigate. So that, to me, that's the same question. What you're getting at here is, how are the tax dollars being spent? Where is it going? How is it being used? Let's get the data out in front of everybody. My question is, if you're successful and it shows that the government is not using those funds correctly, will this help push philanthropy money back to the churches, to the individuals, to like, I'm coming from a very conservative background. I would love to see the people do this work, not the government. But so that's the question. If you're successful, does this actually put philanthropy back where it needs to be?
Well, let me say we don't draw any value judgments on what the right way is for things to happen. You know, do I personally have views? Of course I have views. I have views on almost any topic we talk about. Our job, though, in this instance, is to present the data and then let people decide what they think. Right now, we don't publish. We will, I think, at some point in the not too distant future. you can publish what is happening in terms of 501c3s and their budgets and how they're funded. We have not focused in on that area yet. I will tell you that relative to my wife and I's focus in on kids and families, we were both right. I know this now from both USA Facts and our philanthropy. Most of the government, most of the money that comes to many of the child serving organizations that we support do come from government. Government is a big funder of the kind of stuff that we care about. So I was right.
Mhm.
My wife's right. Government doesn't fund everything they have to do. And so we now see how those things relate. I think it's society's job to decide how much philanthropy does versus how much is done by government. I will tell you that just by the numbers, my read, there's simply not enough philanthropy to replace all that government does to support kids and families. I mean, if the money government put out there disappeared, basically, and philanthropy, of course, covers things other than kids and families, art museums, hospitals, universities, and the like. So now I'm giving you my personal point of view. My personal point of view is that for kids and families to not take a step back, money is being spent. It can be cut. That's society's job to decide. If it is, we can show you where it goes away. If it's increased, we can show where it goes away. But whatever happens, there's just not enough money philanthropically. If people choose to cut, there's not enough money to fill in. That's kind of the math. And then, but there's a lot of complexity in that, Chris. A lot of complexity. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing, which is two things. Number one, we're happy payers of our taxes. And number two, we're happy donors of money to a lot of organizations that we think are worthwhile and supporting kids in great ways. One of my favorite things is we've helped fund a program for 18,000 kids, 5 weeks, 5 days a week for K through 8 kids, less affluent kids to learn a little math, learn a little English over the summer and get some enrichment. Stuff like that brings me great joy, but everybody's got to decide what's right for them, and society has to decide how much money to collect in taxes and where to spend it.
Yeah. Chris, thank you. Grateful to you. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, he said your son's a genius and didn't tell me what to know about that. What is your son up to?
I'm hoping you'll hear about him next week or the end of this week. There's some, so he's doing SMRs, small nuclear reactors. Look up Valor, VALAR atomics. If you haven't heard about him yet, you will be hearing about him very quickly.
Super. Thanks for telling me.
Steve, Chris was on recently and talked about his son down at Mar-a-Lago presenting to some folks down there, including somebody How about that?
He's been in the White House plenty in the last couple months as well, working on things.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Steve, Chris, thank you. Steve, again, people can go to usafacts.org, but just tell people again, if they're interested in your work, supporting your work, using your work, what are the ways they can do that?
usafacts.org or USA Facts YouTube channel. Subscribe to our newsletter, which you can do on usafacts.org, or follow us on Instagram or Twitter.
Okay. We're really grateful to you for spending the hour with us, and we hope you'll come back, and whenever you've got a new video, new project, we'd love to share it with everybody on Two Way.
Super. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks Mark for giving me time today.
Thank you, Steve. Grateful to you and your folks for coming on. All right, a few things. In a moment, I'll be on News Nation with Chris Cuomo. So if you want to see more of me, I don't know why that would be, but if you want to see more of me, come on over to News Nation. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean, Dan, and the guest host, and I will be on the morning meeting with previewing your day for you. Tomorrow, this program will be live on the Two Way platform at 5 Eastern time. 5 Eastern, not 6, 5 Eastern. It'll stream on YouTube at 6. So regular time for your YouTube or X watchers. But if you're going to come here as some folks did to participate, please be here. And we've got two great guests. I'll put them in the Substack so you can see it there. But we've got two great guests who are affiliated with the Trump administration in one way or the other. You won't want to miss them. They're both really super interesting guys. So we'll see you at 5 Eastern here, 6 on the YouTube. And then also tomorrow, new episode of my program Next Up on the Megyn Kelly Network drops, and that'll include a long conversation between me and my friend Joe Scarborough, where we find common cause and have a little bit of a disagreement in some cases about the whole arc of the Biden story about his acuity decline. And Joe and I have been having private conversations about that topic for many years. And we have it in front of all of you. So join us for that tomorrow. You see it on the Next Up YouTube channel, or you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts tomorrow late afternoon. Grateful to everybody for joining again. Grateful to Steve Ballmer and the folks at USA Facts, and grateful to you, all of you, for being part of it. I'll see it either on News Nation in just a moment or 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.